The Sam Sorbo Show is brought to you in partnership by the Herzog Foundation.
Hi there and welcome. Our guest today is a distinguished political scientist. She's an award-winning author and a former professor at Vanderbilt University and Princeton University. She's got a career that spans decades in academia. She's written extensively on politics and culture and the challenges facing higher education. Her latest book exposes a major scandal in elite academia, shedding light on the systemic failures that threatened academic integrity. She's a fearless advocate for truth and accountability. She continues to challenge institutions to uphold the very highest ethical standards. This is the Sam Sorbo Show with Dr. Carol Swain. Here we go.
Sam, welcome back to the program.
I'm glad to welcome Sam Sorbo.
It's great to have you here.
All right, welcome back. This is the Sam Sorbo Show. So joining me today is Dr. Carol Swain. She's a renowned political scientist and award-winning author, the former professor at Vanderbilt and Princeton Universities. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So we've known each other for a little bit, and it is so good to see you and see you plugging a new book, which I'm very excited about. I have to share the name of this book because it made me laugh out loud. It's called The Gay Affair. It sounds different than what it actually is, but you tell me that it came out on the anniversary of the resignation of Dr. Should I call her doctor? Because we're not really sure she actually.
No, you don't call her doctor. And it came out on the anniversary of her resignation as president of Harvard. The full title is The Gay Affair, Harvard Plagiarism and the Death of Academic Integrity. And I assure you, it's not my first romance novel. I've never written a romance novel.
Well, the title is deceptive, frankly, a little bit deceiving. Like it's a little bit off topic, but the subtitle, of course, explains it. And so let's just talk about why you had to write this book, because you were plagiarized.
I was, and I can tell you that it was December 10th, 2023, when I received a phone call at night, someone asking me, had I heard about the president of Harvard University, that she had plagiarized her dissertation. And the next question was, guess who she plagiarized? You. And I was stunned. It was like a gut punch. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I was trying to process it. And that's when I started getting calls from the media. And it was like nonstop until probably through January, part of February. I was on NBC News, CBS News, CNN. The world was interested in that situation. And the title, The Gay Affair, it had to do with Claudine Gay, former president of Harvard University, and what I went through. And I went through a lot. I was working on my memoir when the story broke. I had 5 chapters written. I've never been able to get back to it. It took me off track.
So interesting. And I have to dive in there because she stole your material. But why did that sidetrack you from just pursuing it? Was it because everybody needed to talk to you about whether this was real? And because I'm surprised that CBS and ABC and frankly, mainstream media, right, is at all interested in discrediting the austere Harvard University and or its president. And yet it seems like they all needed to know more. Were the interviews that you did hostile?
No, they were not. They were very kind, and I was treated with a lot of respect. I believe because Claudine Gay and the 2 other university professors had discredited themselves when they testified before Congress about the anti-Semitism on their campuses, that the world was interested in it. And so they had seen Claudine Gay. She was the worst performer of the 3. They were all coached by the same attorney. The other 2 were bright enough that when Elise Stefanik started pressing them, they pivoted. She did not pivot. And so I think that was part of the interest. And you asked me why I was derailed. first I had to process it, and I did not rush to judgment. I'm on X all the time, so I post every day, and I posted something that basically I said I have to investigate this. I'm not ready to jump to conclusions. I don't remember my exact words, but I wanted to read the work first. So that meant I stopped and I started reading her work, first her articles and then her dissertation, and I came away very disturbed. And some people are confused because she plagiarized. There may have been 20 people. There were 47 instances of plagiarism. My contention is that it was more serious in my case because it was her dissertation, and that she used a conclusion in my dissertation to frame her research question. And basically, she used me as a straw man without saying who the straw man was. And I'm quoted. She has a citation in her dissertation. Some of her articles may have one citation, maybe a sentence from me, but not the way you do academic research. Like, it's fine to take down someone. It's fun to take down someone. When we do research, we either build on someone's research or we go beyond their research. We say why they're wrong and why our approach is better. She didn't do that, and it was almost like
Hold
that
on.
was bad.
What
Go
did
ahead.
she do? Like, she didn't do the proper way, but what was she doing with your research? And what was the research on?
Oh, I have my first book was titled Black Faces, Black Interests, The Representation of African Americans in Congress, and it was published in 1993 by Harvard University Press. It won 3 national prizes, including the highest prize a political scientist can win. And it was cited by Library Choice, one of the outstanding books of 1994, but it was on how well the US Congress represents African American interests. And I concluded that political party was more important than the race of the representative. And as long as Blacks held the views they did, they would best be represented by Democrats. Consequently, it didn't make sense to draw majority Black legislative districts. That was controversial at the time because then and now the arguments are made that only Blacks can represent Blacks. I argued that whites could represent Blacks and Blacks could represent whites, and your best representative could be someone outside your group. So it was controversial. And basically, her research was meant to demonstrate why Black people needed Black representatives. And I contend that there's no way her committee could not have known about my research, but progressives, being progressives, they needed a high profile Black person to counter a high profile Black person. I was at Princeton on the faculty at the time that I was plagiarized, and at the time I was getting lots of attention from my research. She was a student at Harvard. And I say in the book that all I could hear about at some point was this brilliant Black student at Harvard, Claudine Gay. That brilliant became her first name.
So she was taking your research as a professor, and as a student, she was trying to discredit your research without even saying who it was who was doing the research.
I'm saying that she was trying to, if you've done a dissertation or even a master's thesis, you have to come up with a topic. And to get a PhD, it's supposed to be an original, path-breaking a subject. My research was path-breaking enough that it received a grant from the National Science Foundation, and I did something that had not been done, traveling around the country with white and Black members of Congress to see how well the Congress represented Black Americans. And I did the quantitative research as well as the qualitative participant observer research. So that was my research. I believe that she was never that talented as a student, and that she was a DEI, affirmative action, from the very beginning, and that by then universities had lowered standards. And I can attest to the fact that when I was hired by Princeton, I was the only Black person at that time on the faculty of the Woodrow Wilson School or the politics department. It had been years since they had a Black person, and that they had a standard that they held everyone to. And to get tenure in the Ivy League, you had to have a path-breaking book, not even articles. Claudine Gay has I believe, 11 articles. Three-quarters of them were plagiarized. She does not have a book, um,
So she
really.
has there's no substance to her. But I'm trying to figure out, so when you were reading, when the discovery was made, oh, Claudine Gay appears to have plagiarized Dr. Carol Swain, you started reading her work and realized that she wasn't plagiarizing you favorably, in a sense. She was
It's not even that.
Okay, explain it,
She
please.
she ignored, it was like, cancel culture. She was putting out research that would have countered what I was doing, but she didn't give me
Right.
the credit you would normally get. And in academia, your standing depends on citations, how many times you're cited. So if you're criticizing someone, if you're supporting them, you cite their work. There are about 5 instances of verbatim plagiarism. A sentence here, a paragraph
Like
there.
like some people say, quote, Dr. Carol Swain, but don't credit her. And other people say, quote, Dr. Carol Swain, but don't credit her. And so it's a wonder that she actually succeeded
Well, no, it
as
isn't.
well as she did.
She had the right pedigree. I'm a
Right.
I'm a mutt. I come from nothing. Literally, nothing. And so she was
Your story,
Haitian
you know what?
aristocracy.
You know what? Your story is actually quite fascinating. Can you just give us, a few sentences about your beginnings, your very humble beginnings?
I can tell you that my story is an American story. I was
Mhm.
one of 12 children, born and raised in rural poverty in southwestern Virginia. I spent the early part of my life in a 2-room shack. Because of the poverty, I dropped out of school after completing the 8th grade, started the 9th, but didn't complete it. I married at age 16, not because I was pregnant, but to get away from home. Had my first child at age 17. And by the time I was 20, I had 3 small children, 2 boys and a girl. The girl died, but people came into my life who encouraged me, and I ended up first getting a high school equivalency, then going to a community college, getting the first of 5 degrees. I have a degree in business. I have one in criminal justice from a 4-year liberal arts schools. There was a school that was predominantly white, Ronald College. I graduated magna cum laude while working 40 hours a week, nights and weekends at the community college library. And then I went to Virginia Tech and got a master's in political science. And while I was there was the recession of the 80s, Ronald Reagan. I applied for jobs, couldn't get anything I wanted. My professors urged me and pushed me to apply to graduate school. I was painfully shy until I was in my 40s. And so I would never, ever have wanted to be a professor, never thought about that as a career, but I applied to graduate school. I got in, and the rest was history. And when Princeton hired me, I was a hot shot, known across the country because as a student, I had given research papers and I had my own short list of schools and I got a sign-in bonus. So I can say that I was the real deal. And then by the time Claudine Gay came along, affirmative action was under attack. That was in the 1990s. And the former presidents of Harvard and Princeton, William Bowen, Princeton, Dirk Bach, Harvard, they wrote a book called The Shape of the River, where they argued that schools had to have affirmative action or there would be no Black leaders because obviously the elite schools produce all the leaders. Not true. But Claudine Gay came along during that time when the heads of the 2 most elite institutions probably in the world had stepped up. Their former presidents had written an article saying that you had to have affirmative action. She benefited from that, but her parents, it was just pure aristocracy. She went to Phillips Exeter Academy. She has an undergraduate degree from Stanford. She did some work at Princeton as an undergrad, her PhD from Harvard. She won a prize for her Harvard dissertation, which was plagiarized, not just my work, but other people as well. She made some corrections. She corrected nothing that pertains to my work, as far as I know.
So that brings us a little bit up to speed. She's an imposter. You're not, very clearly. What risks did you come up against with writing a book against Harvard?
Well, I mean, the greater risk was when I tried to sue Harvard. The book, The Gay Affair, talks about what I went through, a range of emotions. I mean, I was stunned and I was so sad. I was so sad because of me being black and she being black and we being black women. I was thinking about this is not a good look. And the first president of Harvard is going to be fired, a black woman. This is bad. That was how I was feeling. But then Harvard came out supporting her. And then she was very defiant. And then it turned to anger. And I don't wear anger well. And so during that December, when I got derailed from working on my memoir, I went through a period of intense anger. And as it was nearing Christmas and I wanted to visit my grandchildren, great grandchildren, I knew I had to get over the anger. And I started posting scriptures on social media for myself. But then people started liking it, and I've been doing it ever since. But I calm myself down. January comes along. I'm doing great. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just rolling along. And then Claudine Gay resigns and she blames racism. And then my blood started to boil again. And it was on. And that's when I called a lawyer who had approached me about suing Harvard pro bono. And I told him that he could write his letter. So he sent the first demand letter to Harvard. Maybe about 2 weeks later, they responded and asked us to use their internal review process. And at that point, I knew from that lawyer and also other lawyers that I, I shouldn't use the internal review process, that the only thing they would understand would be a lawsuit. So I hired a legal firm in Nashville that was not pro bono, and I embarked on, I was going to sue Harvard. They wrote their own demand letter. And in the book, it shows their letters, Harvard's letters back to us, which basically, in a way, it contained a threat, but it was really a warning, which was true. Under copyright law, loser pays. And so if I had gone up against them and lost, I might have to pay for Harvard's lawyers. And I was told that their lawyers make about $1,000 an hour. My lawyers were being paid $350 an hour. And I was told it would take $250,000 minimum to sue Harvard. I didn't have that kind of money. And so I felt like I have to hold Claudine Gay accountable. I have to hold Harvard accountable. And the book is not just about Claudine Gay and me, it's about other instances of plagiarism involving faculty and high profile people that just got brushed off. But if it was a student, and Chanel Rion of One America News wrote the foreword, she talks about an incident that happened at Harvard, I believe in 2012, involving 125 undergrads who got bad advice from a TA, and the school dealt harshly with them and ruined some of their lives. So they hold students to one standard, and then the faculty, no.
Once the faculty's in, they're in. I mean, it
They
was a
are.
black mark on Harvard's record for Claudine Gay to step down. How did she, you know what, we need to take a quick break.
Not really. Okay, we talk later.
Sorry, we're going to take a quick break, and then I want to follow up on that and find out how this sort of ended, what you ended up doing with the potential lawsuit and all of those good things, plus my 3 standard questions. So that'll be right up after the break with Dr. Carol Swain. This is the Sam Sorbo Show. We'll be right back. Thanks for tuning into the Sam Sorbo Show. You know, we are in a battle for our very nation, a nation that was founded on Christian principles and on the Bible. The 10 Commandments is the basis for our rule of law. But these days, when you go talk to people on the street, you'll find that most of them don't even know what rule of law means. And that's why I'm so proud to have Herzog Foundation as a sponsor of my show. I also love what they do because they seek for the benefit of Christian education throughout the nation. So Herzog Foundation is a wonderful partner for us here at the Sam Sorbo Show. Thanks for watching. Stay ahead of the storm with IQ Weather, a premium all-video homeschool course that makes learning science exciting and engaging. This vivid, entertaining program incorporates physics, chemistry, geography, geology, astronomy, and oceanography, giving your kids a well-rounded education in the fascinating world of weather. Designed to captivate young minds, IQ Weather makes complex concepts easy to understand and fun to explore. Visit iqweather.com and use code SAM to get 15% off your order. Give your kids a science education they'll love and stay prepared for anything. Start your IQ Weather journey today. All right, welcome back to the Sam Sorbo Show. I'm here with my guest, Dr. Carol Swain, and she's been talking about this, the book, The Gay Affair, about Claudine Gay and her existence as the president of Harvard as a Black woman who plagiarized Dr. Swain, my guest. And so I was going to say, I can't remember the circumstances under which she stepped down, but I think it was just sort of this belligerence of, well, I'm going to save Harvard the negative attention, but I never did anything wrong kind of sorry,
Yes.
not sorry letter, right? And Harvard never made any recourse towards you, did they?
No, Harvard backed her up all the way that she was this wonderful scholar. And, it was just sickening to see her in part blame racism and Harvard back her up. And for me, basically, if you read those letters, it seemed like there was a veiled threat that if I persisted, they said I had a frivolous lawsuit. And I can tell you that I was not the only person plagiarized. In fact, there were people that she borrowed more from their work because they agreed with her ideologically. She did not agree with me ideologically. And back then I was a Democrat, but I was always a person with good common sense. So I was a Democrat, but I had the right position on that issue. And later the Supreme Court cited me and reaffirmed. And so I was ahead of my time. And I don't want to brag, Sam, but
Yeah,
I'm
you
often
do.
ahead of my time in my research. And so the thing that really got me was Harvard had no interest in doing the right thing. They could have done the right thing, but they stood behind her. And September of last year, the Harvard Black alumni gave her some kind of award for courage or something like that. And they allowed her to teach research and writing to graduate students. She taught last fall on research and writing. So, I mean, it's just horrible what they got away with. And so my book was the only way to hold them accountable.
Instead of pursuing the lawsuit.
Right.
Their letter intimidated you, and rightly so, frankly. When they're paying their lawyers $1,000 an hour, you can't afford either to pay their lawyers or your own lawyers at that
Right.
rate in any case. And frankly, it's a number. It often comes down to a numbers game in court cases like that. It's same thing with politics. It's not necessarily who the better candidate is. We all know that it's how much money they have in their war chest. So I'm not surprised. But let me ask you this. Our commander in chief, the previous one, was a plagiarist. Is this a shock?
Well, something, there's a rich tradition of plagiarism if you look at various people. And I'm not shocked because now they have pretty much normalized it. When you
Mm.
have faculty at elite institutions and they pay no price for plagiarism, then they have normalized it and redefined it. I forgot about mentioning this. Another reason that Harvard really got to me is that they said that she had not plagiarized, that she had merely engaged in duplicative language without attribution.
Sorry. What? That's literally the definition of plagiarism.
Well, I mean, that's how they redefined it to make it more palatable. And I received emails from people that were supporters of hers telling me to back down. And if Claudine Gay had picked up the phone and called me and apologized, because I see her as a victim. I think she is and was a victim of that DEI culture that has been so much into quotas, and they chose her. She was handpicked because she had the right pedigree. And someone like me, like, it's difficult to fit in anywhere because you don't have the connections, you don't have the pedigree. And I certainly didn't have the money. And I thought about myself. I did not want to be using my Social Security and my hard-earned retirement money at this stage in my life to pay Harvard's lawyers because I went up against a giant and lost. And then I learned, and the book talks about copyright law. Under copyright law, and her lawyers, one of her lawyers says this, that ideas are not protected. You can steal people's ideas. That plagiarism is not a felony. It's not a misdemeanor. It's a moral breach. And so you can
Correct.
steal ideas under copyright law. They're not protected. And then the lawyer said that what she took was de minimis, meaning that she didn't take that much, and it was fair use. Well, when we think about fair use, we're thinking about where you borrow, maybe someone gets a clip of another show and they run that, but they give attribution, or they may quote another an article or something. They give attribution. And when it came to the Harvard's letters, the Harvard attorney letters, I learned from my lawyers that I could not put them in the appendix verbatim, because even though Harvard sent me the letters, they own those letters. And so I used excerpts. That someone sends you a letter, they still retain ownership of the letters. You have to have
That's
permission.
funny. I would have used the letters, and if they had sued me, then I would have brought it all the way to court and turned it around on them and said, "So what was this? What she was doing to me?"
But
I'm kidding.
if you
Kidding,
can
of
afford
course.
to lose, and I had a friend that was supporting me. I don't know if you know of this man, Dr. Bob.
No, but I remember you on LinkedIn. You were posting a lot about this on LinkedIn about Claudine Gay. I remember you were very angry about what she had done and about what she was saying. Her behavior afterwards, I think, was more the insult than the fact that she took some of your research and didn't credit you with having done the research. But it was more just this abject denial of having done anything wrong whatsoever. I love that you're pointing out, and people really have to know this. I mean, I wrote a movie years ago and it was stolen, and I can trace the chain of command to from me to the people who stole it. It still contains scenes that I wrote, and there really wasn't a lawsuit there. I mean, in theory, there was a lawsuit that I probably would have lost because I was going up against a Goliath as a complete unknown. But the point is, you can't copyright an idea. You can only copyright the expression of the idea. And so if the expression of the idea is demonstrably changed, then you can't copyright it. And with plagiarism, of course, we're talking about something that's actually even more different than that, even though it should count. But it only counts in a morally principled society. And when you're dealing with these people, leftists or Democrats or whatever, they have a view that breaking the rules is actually perfectly justifiable, because that's why we have DEI. We break the rules in order to give people special breaks and special, add-ons or whatever.
Well,
Right?
my attorney said that they thought I had a strong case for expanding copyright law, and that in the area of academia, that it's an untested area. But when I asked, would you be willing to go forward on pro bono, they said no.
No.
And I mentioned Dr. Bob because he gave me some really good advice. He said that he had sued people in his life, and the only reason you sue someone is to make them stay up at night. He said Claudine Gay is not going to lose any sleep. No one at Harvard is going to lose any sleep. Basically, you're the only one that's going to lose sleep. And it was true.
Yeah.
It did consume my life. And I tell you how it derailed me, because I spent a lot of time with the lawyers. I had to work with them to explain academia, to create a side by side of what she took, what I wrote, to lay out the case. I basically did my own work while paying them. And the complaint is a part of the appendices of the book. And so I did that, and it was during the summer I decided that I was not going to file the lawsuit. It was ready to go.
Yeah.
I chose not to file the lawsuit. Then I started on the book. And so the book took up the fall.
That's
and it was
why.
published on January 2nd, because I wanted it to come out on the anniversary of her resignation as president of Harvard. It did come out, but no one noticed because there was so much politics with President Trump's reelection. And so maybe that wasn't thought through well enough because I got the symbolism of the January 2nd date. But at the end of the day, the book did not get attention from the places where I would normally expect to have been been interviewed. It just didn't happen.
Yeah. Well, I think now is a good time to do a nice publicity push for something like this as people are considering colleges, and to talk about the institutions where we send our children for their learning. Maybe Harvard shouldn't be the first place that you think of when you think of a revered, austere institution of higher learning. Maybe they're learning the wrong things at some of these institutions, right?
They definitely are. And it's not just Harvard, it's that whole elite structure. When I was at Princeton, they were pretty conservative, and they have totally gone woke in a
Mm.
way that's damaged the university. And that's just across the board. I believe that we can save our institutions of higher education because there are students and parents that are making the decision that maybe a college degree isn't worth it, and they are making a decision that they're not going to pay. Even if that child gets into one of those elite schools, the child has to go, to the state school or go somewhere they trust. So it has hurt the Ivy League. They don't know it. And as far as how I have felt, I had believed that Harvard has added insult to injury because they pretty much had her make some corrections, but they have never acknowledged what was done to me.
Right.
And there would not have been a Claudine Gay dissertation on that topic had it not been for my work. Maybe
Right.
she would have written a dissertation on something else, but she wouldn't have written that particular dissertation. So that is what helped establish her career. And I don't believe she's earned a doctorate, because to earn a doctorate, you need to produce path-breaking work. They
Right.
gave her work a prize. There's no way the people on her committee hadn't heard of my own work.
Yeah. So the fix was in, but they didn't like you because they didn't like your politics. They didn't like your conclusions. They didn't like your thought process, the fact that you adhere to truth instead of fiction, all that stuff. And so it's interesting how they refuse to treat the other side the way that our culture insists that we treat people, right? That our
I was a
culture.
Democrat at the time, but they started labeling me as a conservative long
Yeah, yeah, they
before
see
I
right
saw
through it. They
myself.
see right through it, and it's funny. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter if you're whatever you're declaring. If you fall on the wrong side of whatever the issue might be, then they'll see right through it. So we talked about we're talking about institutions, sending your children to institutions of higher learning at colleges and universities. And I just wanted to point out to parents that they've done studies now, and young people who get accepted into your elite universities, the Harvards, the Princetons, Yales, all of those, but choose not to go for whatever reason, that 5 years after graduating another college, they are earning, on average, they're earning the same amount as the kids who went to the Ivy League schools and paid maybe twice as much for their degrees. So rest assured, you don't have to have that almighty title for your alma mater in order to assure you the income that you think might be commensurate with that.
But I think the Ivy League has just lost its luster.
Yeah.
In fact, I saw a cartoon, and maybe it may have been a Dilbert cartoon, where this interviewer, he's interviewing this young man. He said, "This is strange. Most people put their college degree on their application. It's Harvard, isn't it?" The young man says, "I'll show myself to the door."
Oh, that's funny. Oh my gosh. I just saw one. I don't think it was Dilbert, but I saw one, and he said, "So there's a period of time where it looks like you weren't doing anything." And the guy says, "I was in Yale." And the man says, "Oh, that's excellent. Well, that's going to," what does he say? Something like, "That's going to come in handy," or something. And the guy answers, "Yes, I really need this job." So he wasn't in Yale. He was in jail. I'm sorry. It reads better, but it's very funny. Yes, I was in Yale. I need the job. Okay. Dr. Carol Swain. Typically, I ask people for their education background and whether they use it in their current work. I think we kind of covered that with you. I think it's fascinating for people to understand. You were a school dropout after 8th grade. Mind you, your 8th grade was probably like 12th grade today, because when you went to school, 8th grade actually meant something. Nowadays, it's like, doesn't mean much of anything. But still, you dropped out in 8th grade, and then you went and got a GED, and then you went and studied some more, and then you went and studied some more, and then you became an academic, or maybe became an academic along the way somewhere in there. But my second question typically is, what advice would you give your younger self? And you can pick any age, but like, what's the nugget of advice that you wish you knew then?
I want to say something about my educational
Oh,
journey.
thank you.
Before I became a university professor, I worked in a garment factory. I worked in nursing homes. I sold Avon from door to door and smoke detectors. I've been a sales clerk. And what I've noticed is how God used all those experiences. And I think the edge I had as a student, because I was very creative, I've always had people stealing my ideas. The book talks about that too. I think it came from all those experiences. So I want people to know that it doesn't matter where you start, it matters where you end up, and that people can start with every advantage and still fail. And what I would tell my younger self, because I went through a period of deep depression, suicide gestures, never thought I'd live to be 40, and now I'm 71. And so I had a hard journey and guilt because I was successful. And I wish I was a Christian believer sooner. I was agnostic most of my life. I believe one God, many paths. I was very spiritual, but I kind of think that if I'd had that spiritual grounding that I have now, I could have gone even further. And then having my children as a teenager, that is part of the circumstances, but I didn't realize I had options. And you always have options. I also thought you had to be rich to go to college. Obviously, that's not true. So there were so many things I didn't know. But I would encourage people that regardless of your circumstances, the choices that you've made, that as long as you're living and breathing, your dreams can still come true. It's never too late to pursue the vision that's in your heart.
I want to point out that the book, The Gay Affair, despite the title, makes a great graduation gift for particularly young women, because I think that Dr. Swain's story speaks to this idea of disenfranchisement and overcoming it. And so you should consider buying several copies to give to new graduates or graduates to be, especially this time of year, just because it's such a great story. And her story, which is part of the book, is really overcoming those obstacles. And I think that's the blessing of listening to you speak, and talk about also your Christian journey, because it's so interesting. Like, you believed in God, but you didn't really know God. And once you got to know God, it relieved some of the guilt and gave you more purpose, right? Gave
He
you a little bit,
empowered me.
yeah, empowered you. Exactly. And I
This
think that's so
meme,
important.
I have a meme that I post periodically that Jesus is my superpower. And I have done I'm not bragging to say extraordinary things for someone that came from nothing. No one in my family had gone to a college or had the life that I do. And God, for whatever reason, God chose me and He positioned me and He's given me this platform. And I do try to speak truth to power. And I never knew that God had a future in store for me when I was that teenage, early, a young adult, taking bottles of pills and calling someone to be rescued. God is responsible for everything that's happened for me. And He put people in my life, and they did not look like me. The people that encouraged me and pushed me did not look like me. And many of them were older white men who treated me with respect and never, let me cut corners.
It's beautiful. Okay, last question. What's the most urgent cultural shift that you think we need today?
We definitely need a spiritual revival. Like we have, God has answered our prayers, I believe, with the election of President Trump, but that's not enough because
Right.
unless you change the hearts and minds of the people, the Democrats will resume power. They would take that White House office of faith that I actually don't think should have been put in there in the first place. I don't think it need to be in the White House, and they would put a pagan or in charge of it or something shocking. And the only way you change the culture, whether you're talking about men in women's sports or men in women's sororities, is that you change the hearts and minds of the people. And that takes a spiritual revival. This is not the time to rest on your laurels.
So you're encouraging people to engage in the conversation just
Engage in
every
the
day.
conversation, but realize that it's not just a political conversation, it's a spiritual
Yeah.
conversation. America has Judeo-Christian roots. People need to know the history of the nation, but they need to know our religious roots. And it will take, again, I can't say it enough, a spiritual revival to change America so that everything that Trump is trying and Elon, these positive changes, to make them more lasting, to ensure that we have real change. It's going to take more than President Trump.
Right. Yes. It takes a lot more than he's one man. He's doing stuff, but we need a Doge for college loans. We need a Doge for the colleges themselves. We need and it takes more than Elon Musk, and it takes more than Robert Kennedy Jr. I mean, there's a lot that has to happen, but I think you're right to point out it has to happen at the grassroots. We have to get engaged. The people have to get engaged in this conversation, even if it's just a conversation in a grocery store, just to get that open minds and bringing evidence for people to reevaluate what they think is happening. Right?
They have to want something different, and a lot of them don't have enough information to want something different. And you see some of the debates that take place in Congress, and casual listeners of both political parties. If you're not, if you're a casual listener, you're not going to know what's at stake.
Right. Right. You have to be more invested in that. Dr. Carol Swain, thank you so much for coming on the program. All right, so that's it for me. This is the Sam Sorbo Show. Thanks so much for joining me. We'll see you next time. Remember, speak truth, speak it boldly. Take care.
The views and opinions expressed in the Sam Sorbo Show are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views and positions of the Herzog Foundation.